Baltimore Ravens preseason football starts tomorrow, and we talk about some under-the-radar players to watch throughout the preseason. All that and more coming up next here on this episode of Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens. We are your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, and I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you, of course, on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you, as always, for being here today, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day and your first listen each and every single day. Free and available for you on all podcasting platforms. So in audio form, anywhere you get your shows, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, we're here for you anywhere, and plus in video form on YouTube. You can like the video and subscribe to the channel as well. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. We are back for a Thursday edition of the show with a first-time guest in Paul Mancano of the Baltimore Banner. And Paul, I'm excited to have you on, and I'm also excited that we are just a day away from Ravens preseason football. I know we were talking about it behind the scenes before the show started, but this offseason was a long one, and we are so close to that finish line of finally having Ravens football back.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Kevin. I feel like everywhere I turn on Twitter, social media, I see what you guys are doing between your other ventures. It's like the Cedric Mullins, I can't escape a meme, but it's all great stuff. But yeah, it's crazy that it is around the corner. Honestly, it feels like a long off season, but at the same time, it feels like there's no off season at all because we had mini camp, we had rookie mini camp before that. Then, right into training camp. It's like there was really very little time where we were not at the facility.
Yeah, and now we are officially almost back, and it's go time for the Ravens now. We did get updates from John Harbaugh on Wednesday, and stating the obvious: Lamar Jackson not going to play, Derrick Henry not going to play. That, I think you and I, Paul, we both could have guessed that one based off of the cautiousness that the Ravens have displayed over the last couple of seasons. But that is going to give opportunities to these other players who are fighting for roster spots and on the roster bubble to go out there and make a name for themselves. So you, Paul, being at practice and just seeing these guys go up against each other and getting into the groove, let's start with the offensive side of the ball. Is there anybody on the offensive side of the ball, whether it be a wide receiver, an offensive lineman, or multiple guys that you have your eye on as the preseason gets going?
Yeah, this is probably not an under-the-radar name for a lot of Ravens fans, but I am the most interested to watch Devontae Walker. He has gotten some hype during training camp, and it has been deserved. A fourth-round rookie. I was really surprised the Ravens didn't make a bigger investment in the wide receiver position when they lost OBJ, but they're counting on Zay Flowers to have a better second season than he did a rookie season, build off his strong rookie season. They're counting on Rashad Bateman, obviously, signing him to that 2-year extension. And then they really don't have a prototypical X receiver. Devontae Walker checks those boxes in terms of his size and his speed. It's just his route running ability. And how many times have we seen Rashad Bateman get open at times, but Lamar Jackson not being able to connect with him? I'm so interested to see how Devontae Walker is able to connect with Lamar Jackson. Unfortunately, we won't get to see that during the preseason, but if he's showing some good signs during the first preseason game on Friday against the Eagles, that he's getting open, that he's beating cornerbacks, that Josh Johnson is looking his way, I think that could be an indicator that, all right, this guy is ready to contribute in year one.
Yeah, and I think going into the offseason, Paul, a lot of people were kind of saying, well, the Ravens, it'd be great if they had this bigger body, jump ball, contested catch wide receiver. And Tez obviously brings a speed element to that as well. But at North Carolina, he was able to excel in those areas. And look, they have Mark Andrews, they have Isaiah Likely, they have their big body targets. But of course, those guys are tight ends and not wide receivers. So to have someone in that room like a Tez Walker who can go up there and get those balls, I think he could. By the end of the season, we might be talking about a player who has increased his role maybe every month during the year. But I think one of the big names, Paul, that everybody's looking out for, just the positions in general, honestly, is the offensive line. They lost 60% of their starters this offseason. It was huge, especially when you lose guys like Kevin Zeitler, who's the steadiest veteran you can come across. Morgan Moses, who when healthy, also very solid. Now, it seems like Andrew Voorhees has a pretty strong grip on that left guard position. Roger Rosengard now getting more work with the ones. But that right guard position, I think, is where everybody's like, well, who's it going to be? Because Daniel Falele's gotten the first team reps. Ben Cleveland's playing some center now with Tyler Linderbaum out. What do you kind of make of this offensive line right now?
It's very much in flux. The group that they're going to have in week 1 of the preseason might not be the group that they're going to have week 1 of the regular season. But we knew this was going to be a process, that the Ravens were going to sort through what they had. But the biggest surprise, probably to me at least, has been getting to see Daniel Falele at guard, because we talked about him all offseason as a tackle. He's a massive guy. He fits more as a tackle. That's really the only position he's been used at in the NFL. And the fact that he was bumped off tackle, I think, showed that the Ravens really watched last year's tape and said, all right, this is not working particularly well. They also feel good about Patrick McCary, I think, and his ability to step up at either of the tackle spots and probably compete with Roger Rosengarten at that right tackle spot. But watching how Daniel Falele does at guard, I think is going to be interesting, especially in week 1 of the preseason, because this is the time to find out, all right, is this group ready to go or not? It's unfortunate they don't have Tyler Linderbaum in there right now, because you would be able to see at least the starting 5 in there. Right. But they've got a little bit of time. They have a little bit of runway here to tinker with what they have for Eric DeCosta to maybe go out and search through free agency, see who's out there. If things turn out to be a disaster, build on some depth that he has in there. So this is going to be a huge test, I think, for Daniel Falele, for Roger Rosengarten, really everybody along that offensive line that is not Ronnie Stanley and it's not Tyler Linderbaum.
And to your point, they did bring in Connor Williams for a visit, who ended up signing with the Seattle Seahawks on Tuesday. So that was short-lived, but it does seem, Paul, like they're still sniffing around some offensive line help, maybe a vet or two to come in and help at whatever position it may be. But the Cleveland at center thing is so interesting to me, because it feels like they've tried him out everywhere. I think he got tackle reps, I think, either last year or 2 years ago. Obviously, his main position is guard, but everybody really thought that heading into the offseason with losing Kevin Zeitler, he was kind of that penciled-in guy at the right guard spot. And it seems like they're moving him around. You mentioned Falele. That's one of the guys I'm watching too. But what's your overall read on Ben Cleveland right now and kind of what his role could be this season?
Yeah, I mean, backup center is not the spot that we would have hoped that he would take during the offseason. I think we all would have hoped, those rooting for him and you know, us in the media watching from the outside would have hoped and expected that he would have gotten that right guard spot, with Daniel Falele now seeming to have supplanted him at this point, although it's very early. That being said, it's not the worst case scenario because the Ravens definitely need a backup center. It's the reason they drafted Nick Samac late in the NFL draft. That's a spot that they could definitely use some depth at. So I don't think it would be the end of the world, but center is a different position. You know, similar to how Daniel Falele is going to have to undergo some changes as he goes from tackle to guard. You have to change who you are, and you have to change your cadences. You have to change a lot of your workouts to go from guard to center. If he can get it down, that's still a valuable piece. You know, you don't have Sam Mustipher in here anymore, who came up big at a couple key moments last season. So to have Ben Cleveland in that spot, while also maybe maintaining the ability to slide in back into guard, could make him a little bit more useful if he ends up being a backup to start the season.
Yeah, and I think with this Ravens team in general, the more you can do, the more versatility you can have. And this goes throughout the entire NFL, Paul. But if you're versatile, there are multiple spots you can play, gives you a better shot at making the roster and just making a general impact. So for Cleveland, hopefully he can play well, whether it is at center or at guard. But I keep going back to Falele at right guard, because obviously Tyler Linderbaum is a little smaller for the center. Still incredible, one of the best players in the league in this position. And Roger Rosengard, one of the things for him coming out of school was, well, he's a little smaller and a little lighter than a lot of the other guys in this position too. And then there's just Falele, who is just this massive human being in the two. But Rosengarten in particular as well, he's a guy that's a rookie coming in from Washington, you know, a clean sheet as a pass blocker, really great footwork, athleticism. It feels like if it's not McCary at right tackle, if they want to use him as that super sub, sixth offensive lineman type of player, feels like Rosengarten would be the shoe-in pencil guy. Are you confident enough, especially with some pretty vaunted pass rushers on the docket for these first 5 weeks for Baltimore, for a rookie, for him to step in and perform well? Or do you think there might be some growing pains, especially with so much newness on the line?
I mean, I think you have to expect some kind of growing pains. But that being said, the Ravens drafted him in the second round to make him the starter at some point during the course of the season. You know, he was not expected to really have a redshirt year. You know, the Ravens invested heavily in that position with that second round pick. That being said, they also didn't invest a first round pick. So there is some, some volatility there. It's not like they got a surefire, day one guy. They got somebody who was considered in the second tier. And part of that was he did struggle in the national championship game against Michigan, going up against a lot of different types of rushers. The other Harbaugh was throwing all kinds of stuff at that Washington offensive line. And he struggled at times to deal with different kinds of pressure over the course of that game. And I think that's perhaps why he slipped into the second round. But he can still be a quality starting tackle in this league based on what scouts have said, based on what we've heard from coaches and his teammates. It's just how early is he going to be called upon to do that? If he is the week one starter, I think you can fairly expect that there are going to be some growing pains. At least it won't be Lamar Jackson's blind spot and his blind side on the left side. But, anytime you do have some faultiness along the offensive line, you do run the risk of having your quarterback get hit more often than he should be. And for Lamar Jackson, the key to this team's success is keeping the reigning MVP upright. So it's going to be a huge test for Roger Rosengarten. And if this is his job in week one, which, at this point, it looks like he's battling with Patrick McCary, then he is going to be thrown right into the fire against Kansas City.
Yeah, he absolutely will be. And I think some other players to keep an eye on, Charlie Collier could be one as well. Obviously, I don't expect to see too much of Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely. In fact, probably none of Mark Andrews in the preseason. And then you also have maybe a Devin Leary, who we know Josh Johnson is the backup quarterback to Lamar, but he's not the long-term option. Maybe, Devin Leary can make a case to be the long-term backup maybe next season. But one guy, Paul, who I think is getting a ton of hype right now is Owen Wright, who's a guy going into his second season as an undrafted guy, was on the Ravens practice squad last season. We know Keaton Mitchell's starting the year on the PUP list, and Harbaugh has already made clear that he's not going to be ready for the start of the year. So that does give some flexibility to maybe if the Ravens want to keep 4 running backs out of the gate, Owen Wright could be a player that, might be able to make an impact, whether it be on special teams. And if he impresses in the preseason, if there might be, I don't know if there's some level of a battle between him and Rasheen Ali for a roster spot, but we do know that if Ali does not impress, Eric DeCosta is not afraid to move off of some of his draft picks before the preseason ends. He's done it multiple different times. What's kind of your take on the backup running back spot right now?
Yeah, I mean, I really thought coming into training camp that was going to be Rasheen Ali's job. I really liked in the pre-draft prep that we did, just watching, YouTube videos and highlight reels of these guys. I really liked what I saw from Rasheen Ali. Now, he was going up against not great competition. He was at Marshall, but he rushed for over 1,000 yards. He could catch the ball out of the backfield. It looked like he could block pretty well. He was pretty explosive. I liked a lot of the things that he did, and clearly the Ravens did too, taking him with a 5th round pick. We heard John Harbaugh say Justice Hill is a starting running back, starting level caliber running back. Hopefully the Ravens won't have to use him in that role, and they'll have Derrick Henry upright. I really don't know, but beyond Derrick Henry, because this is going to be a different formation for the running backs this year. The Ravens have not had an RB1 the caliber of Derrick Henry in a long, long time, and he's frankly one of the best running backs in NFL history. So not many teams can say that they've had a Derrick Henry level talent. And he's also unique in his ability to take a lot of carries, led the league in carries several of the last, 5 seasons. So he can carry the workload. He's going to be 30 years old. That is, up there for any position, let alone running back. If he maintains his health throughout the season, that second running back position shouldn't matter all too much unless we start to see Keaton Mitchell return to the field and really tap into the potential we saw on the field for the second half of last season when he came back and was right before his injury, was looking like he was an explosive playmaker that, he could be an RB1 of the future. I'm just interested to see exactly how much of the carry share Derrick Henry is going to get during the regular season. Are they going to use him like the Titans did? Are they going to have him running out there 20, 25, close to 30 times a game? That's a lot to put on the shoulders of a 30-year-old. But then again, they signed him to that massive contract for a reason, and it's because he is unique in his ability to take the lion's share of carries.
Yeah, when I first saw those Tennessee stats, Paul, I was like, wow. I mean, you saw low 300s, high 200s, and the crazy part to me was he only missed time out of the last 5 seasons. Only really one of those 5 seasons he missed significant time. He's been able to take on that lion's share, as we talked about. And the Ravens have been working through a level of a committee in every single season. Lamar Jackson has been the starter of this team. They haven't really had a bell cow running back in a while, but obviously with Derrick Henry being who he is, like we talked about, I mean, he's a running back one, and there's not a debate whatsoever. So I think that it's him, and then it's everybody else. Once Keaton comes back, that is going to make things interesting. Coming up, though, in the second part of the show, we'll talk about the defensive side of the ball, flip the field. Stay tuned. We got a lot to get to here on Locked On Ravens. First, this show is brought to you by LinkedIn. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools you have to find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. And for me, I've had a ton of great experiences over on LinkedIn, whether it's finding new jobs, connecting, networking. LinkedIn has it all. And LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else. Even those who aren't actively searching for a new job might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like professional on LinkedIn. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time and resources to hire. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. We are back, our second segment, Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher and Paul Mancano still talking with you here on this Thursday. Again, 1 day away from Ravens preseason football. They open up the preseason. Baltimore does on Friday against the Philadelphia Eagles. And Paul, on the defensive side of the ball, we know the Ravens, much like the offense, went through a lot of turnover, a lot of young guys expected to step up and perform this season. Starting with the front of this group, the defensive line, the pass rushers, I think to me, and my breakout pick all offseason has been Travis Jones for this team. I expect him to get some level of snaps, not play the whole game, obviously, but I think he's going to get some level of work. I also think outside linebacker-wise, keeping an eye on Tavius Robinson, David Ajabo, those types of guys too. How confident are you in these younger players to step up for guys like Jadeveon Clowney, who's gone, and other players that need to make a big impact to replicate what the Ravens had last season?
I think you have to be pretty confident because they have a lot of lottery chips there. Like you said, they have a lot of guys who can have breakout seasons. And that has been the model for this team is you draft these guys with mid-round picks that you think you can get something out of, maybe not in their rookie years, but in their second, third, and fourth years. It's what worked perfectly with Justin Madubuike. It's the reason that he was able to break out last season. I think they hope for the same thing from Odafe Oweh. I know he's already viewed as the best pure edge pass rusher on this team. Aside from Justin Madubuike, rushes usually from up the middle. Odafe Oweh has a chance, like a lot of people have said, to have a breakout season as well. But where this team fills in the gaps, losing Jadeveon Clowney is going to be big because Kyle Van Noy is 33 years old, had a great season, career year last year, but how long can you count on him to be able to go out there and give you that much juice from the edge? So the Ravens have to feel good about the group that they have in here. That being said, I don't think you should, count out another addition. It was around this time last year that they signed Jadeveon Clowney. What they got out of Jadeveon Clowney, I don't think they even expected for him to be inking a big contract with Carolina, 1 year later.
Yeah.
But they have, the ability to go out and add to that group if they need to. Maybe not get a top level guy via trade, but maybe find somebody to bolster that kind of depth. I still think they'll be fine in that department. And it's really going to come down to how new defensive coordinator Zach Orr is able to utilize these guys, because that's how Jadeveon Clowney broke out. He had shown flashes with other teams, but there was a reason he had only been able to sign 1 year deals every offseason. And it's because he never really fully cashed in on his potential until last year. And that was in large part due to what Mike Macdonald did with him.
Yeah, and that is kind of been the Ravens' MO over the last couple of off seasons, especially now with Lamar Jackson on his massive deal, where you have to be able to hit on your veteran minimum or close to your veteran minimum signings here. And so the Ravens, they're strategic always when they talk about the offseason and free agency. It's well, they're just going to take a step back, let the markets kind of develop themselves. They maybe make 1 or 2 signings, and then they wait and they wait and they wait until some of these guys maybe bring their price points down. And we've now seen that with guys like Eddie Jackson. They bring back their old Worley. They obviously brought in Russell Gage on Tuesday. So they're now, this is like when the Ravens work and they try to fill in the remaining roster hole. So I'm with you, Paul. I wouldn't be shocked if they made another addition there as well. But moving to the second level, inside linebacker wise, obviously Trenton Simpson has been the big name. He's going to step into big shoes, replacing Patrick Queen on that defense. He's a player that I think everybody's going to be watching this preseason, how he performs. Obviously, he had a pretty great audition in week 18 last season against Pittsburgh, and I think that's what everybody's going off of. But it's a new season for him. What have you seen out of Trenton Simpson, and how excited are you for him this season?
Yeah, it's kind of tough to evaluate these guys, these inside linebackers in particular, right, during training camp, because there's, the hitting is not what it is right during when the bullets are flying during the regular season. But you do have to go by what you hear from his coaches, what you hear from his teammates, and everybody seems to be, having ringing endorsements of this guy. It is big shoes to step up into, and to take Patrick Queen's spot, somebody who had a phenomenal breakout season last year, right in time for free agency. But the Ravens had this plan in place. They knew that Trenton Simpson was going to step up. They knew that they were not going to, have the option to re-sign Patrick Queen. And they're relying a lot on Roquan Smith being that force multiplier, to use the phrase that John Harbaugh loves. They're relying on him to bring Trenton Simpson along. I don't think it'll be just like the conversation we had about the offensive line. I don't think you can expect Trenton Simpson to step up in his second season after getting a handful of snaps last year and to be a Pro Bowler, to be Patrick Queen's level. But he needs to be passable, because you're hoping that, the group around him is going to be able to lift him up. So I'm excited to see what he does. He checks all the boxes from a physicality standpoint and from a mentality standpoint, from what we've heard. It's just when it starts, the pads start hitting and these guys are out there, is he going to be exposed at all? And I think the Ravens rightfully have placed a good deal of trust in this second-year player.
Yeah, and I think he does fit all the boxes of just what the Ravens and Zach Orr want out of him. I mean, he does have the sideline-to-sideline speed, and so hopefully it'll be a pretty seamless transition. But, of course, I think with him there will be some growing pains as well, because you're right, kind of it was a redshirt season in a way. And so to be able to have him step into live action like that, again, doesn't mean he won't be great by the end of the season. But, again, to expect him to come in there and be the next Ray Lewis after one game, it's a little much to put on Trenton Simpson right now. But I also think, Paul, in the secondary, that's where everybody's looking, especially after Eddie Jackson's addition and Darryl Worley being brought back. But I think safety, they're pretty set there with those four. And obviously I'm including Kyle Hamilton and Marcus Williams in that conversation. But at cornerback, you bring in Nate Wiggins, you bring in TJ Tampa, who has obviously spent some time not practicing on the PUP list. But to me, these underrated players that I'm keeping an eye out for, I think Jalen Armour-Davis and Pepe Williams might be competing for one spot. Ardarius Washington is really intriguing to me, especially, and this kind of gets into our third segment, but Arthur Millette going to have the scope on his knee and probably be back sometime around October, apparently, is what the rumors and reports are. So with Millette out, I think Ardarius Washington now slots in as your slot cornerback, and John Harbaugh and the coaching staff has had a lot to say about him. But those three guys, Jalen Armour-Davis, Pepe Williams, Ardarius Washington, are you looking out for them this preseason?
Yeah, absolutely. I think before they signed Eddie Jackson, we were talking about Ardarius Washington getting a lot more playing time. Yeah, there are concerns about his size. I mean, that is, there's no bones about it. He's 5'8". I'm 5'8". I think he's a whole lot more athletic and stronger than I am, but I could stand eye to eye with him at some point. I think that, the Eddie Jackson signing definitely tries to safeguard some of that. And we saw just how much injuries can affect the secondary last season. Depth was so big for this team in the secondary, because when, Marlon Humphrey went down with injury and he missed a lot of time last season, when Marcus Williams missed time and wasn't fully himself, when Kyle Hamilton missed time last season, they relied on these veterans a la Eddie Jackson and like Ronald Darby to step up. Yep. And Arthur Millette. I don't think this team expected Arthur Millette to have the kind of role last season that he did. So with Arthur Millette now being down, they might bring in another guy, another veteran off the street. They brought back Darryl Worley. But the intriguing thing is, are these young guys ready to go? Is our Darius Washington ready to be thrown into the fire? Jalen Armour-Davis, I think, has been such a fun idea now for a couple of years because he is a prototypical guy, and coming out of a top tier program in college, you're thinking this guy might be, a top cornerback at some point over the course of his career. He just hasn't gotten the opportunity, and it's through no fault of his own. So I'm interested to see how all of these guys do and to see if the Ravens really trust these guys. Now that Arthur Millette is going to miss some time, are they going to make another addition? Are they going to say, you know what, we're good. We're good with Jalen Armour-Davis. We're good with Pepe Williams and our Darius Washington. We'll have those guys battle it out.
Yeah, and I think you also have to look at the market too and say, well, is there anybody there that could be a potential needle mover as a depth piece? Because just to bring in somebody, well, that just takes away, snaps some young guys who might be as good, if not better than those guys. And I think Baltimore's done a pretty good job at that, of not just bringing in guys to bring in guys. They bring in guys who they know can have an impact. So to me, Millette's a big loss. And coming up in the final part of the show, we're going to be getting more into what happened with him, other injury notes, practice notes, and a lot more. We got a lot coming your way next year on Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by Gametime. I love going to MLB games during the summer. I have a ton of great memories of when I was growing up going to baseball games, and I try to get to a few a season here in Baltimore. And Gametime is an authorized ticket marketplace for Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch, with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, use and receipt, and the lowest price guarantee. Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. And on the Gametime app, for the Orioles, they, of course, are going down the stretch for their AL East hunt. And then, of course, for the Ravens opening up the season, Gametime has it covered on both fronts ticket-wise. And favorite features on the app, there are a lot. My favorite, though, is last-minute deals. You can save up to 60% off buying last-minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and so much more. Plus, the app is super easy to use and easy to navigate, and other features include flash deals, zone deals, all-in pricing, seat to lose, lowest price guarantee, Gametime ticket coverage, and so much more. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNFL, spell LOCKEDO on NFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guarantee. We return with Locked On Ravens with Paul Mancano. I am Kevin Ostreicher. And Paul, we kind of talked about it at the end of the second segment, now into the third. Arthur Millette, the reports coming out, and John Harbaugh talked about it and confirmed it as well, as he's having a scope on his knee. That popped up on Tuesday. There weren't really any updates, but now we know it should be a decent amount of time he's out, but it is not season ending, right? It's not something that's going to be keeping him out for 3-5 months. It probably is going to be a month or two for him. Now, he's been one of the stars of training camp by all accounts. In your eyes, Paul, from what you've seen from him, how big of a blow is that to the Ravens defense? Kind of like what we were talking about in the second part of the show.
Yeah, it certainly is. The fact that he's coming back into this defense, obviously a different coordinator now, going from Mike McDonald last year to Zach Orr this year, but this is his second year in Baltimore. It's his second year in the system. It's a fun story as kind of a, former Pittsburgh Steeler who has a little bit of a grudge against his former team. And we saw really how well he performed last year. Between him and Geno Stone, like two of the most surprising performers in that secondary last year. And the fact that they were able to get him back on a 2-year deal is, wasn't a coup, but it was certainly a testament to what they did for him and what he provided for them. So it is a loss. But I think that the hope is you have Marlon Humphrey, who is expected to be full go for this season. He's looked awesome in training camp. He has looked like his Pro Bowl self. He's talking like his old Pro Bowl self out there. That, if he is your cornerback one, if he is your, Pro Bowl level cornerback, that takes a lot of the burden off everybody else. We know how good Kyle Hamilton is back there, able to erase a lot of mistakes. You can use him all over the field. You can use him in the slot, and that's where Arthur Millette played a lot of his games last year. Marlon Humphrey can play in the slot. Then you add Nate Wiggins, who's their first-round pick. This team has invested, then invested again, and invested again in secondary because they're so deeply concerned about an injury like this derailing their season. And of all the guys to lose, you don't want to lose Arthur Millette. It could have been worse. Like you said, you expect to get him back. But this team has safeguarded for this time and time again. And if they can't, sustain an injury like this, then, we're not talking about the same group that, was one of the best in the NFL last year.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And I think we've seen it's an NFL wide thing, Paul, but specifically with this team, we've seen secondary injuries derail their seasons time and time again. I even go back to 2014 when they were signing guys off the show. I mean, I think I was next, as I always say. I think they were going to sign me next. They run out of guys, but it has happened so much. So they stock up and they stock up. And hopefully, again, a player like an Ardarius Washington or a Pepe Williams can come in and be able to hold it down before Arthur Millette comes back. Now, for Rashad Bateman, Paul, this has been, I think, probably the biggest storyline of Ravens training camp, just how he's able to establish a connection with Lamar. And it got off to a rocky start in terms of Lamar missing with an illness and then Bateman having to go out as well. Bateman's already missed 2 separate times due to 2 separate things here. So for you, where are you on the Rashad Bateman train? I mean, if he can stay healthy, there's a lot of potential, but I think that's the biggest question mark.
Honestly, I was pretty surprised when this team signed him to the extension that they did several months ago, only because I thought that was a spot that they could upgrade in the future. We knew he was going to be back for 2024, but I thought the Ravens would try to add a bigger piece and expect him to leave, or even try to trade him. He even said in his in minicamp, I believe it was, that he was kind of expecting a trade at some point, but they ended up reinvesting in him. They gave him that extension and said, we believe in you. And there's reason to believe that there is still a lot there, even after his major injury and the time it took to come back. My biggest concern is just how often do you see a guy go from 367 yards in one season where he was fully healthy, he played every game or almost every game last season, except for maybe week 18, to then going to, 800, 900, close to 1,000 yards. I'm not saying the Ravens need him to be 1,000-yard receiver this year, but they need him to do a whole lot more than 367 yards last year. They need him to top 500 yards, probably top 600 yards. So, they're going to have guys there that they didn't have last year. Zay Flowers is supposed to be better. They're going to have Devontae Walker as an intriguing rookie. And they're going to have, probably a better tight end tandem than they have in a long time. But they need Rashad Bateman to get on the same page as Lamar Jackson. And until we see it in game action, we can see it during practice, and we've seen a lot more of it the last couple of days, which is good. But until we see it during the game, we have to see him get open, and we have to see Lamar not just throwing his way, but connecting with him. If they can get on the same page again, then this group can do a lot of things. But it's just a matter of what is going on between the two of them and if they can be in lockstep.
Yeah, and I know people who listen to this show every day are probably sick of me saying this, but if you're not Marquise Brown, if you're not Zay Flowers, if you're not Mark Andrews, you're probably not getting a lot of targets in this offense, because those three have been the only ones who have consistently gotten, 7, 8, 9, 10 targets per game. And then we saw like last season, Paul, where Odell Beckham and Rashad Bateman were in that 2 to 4, 2 to 5 target range per game. And I think if you want to maximize him, you have to spread the ball out more. And I think you have to just throw the ball more in general. Don't get away from your rushing identity. I mean, we saw that in the AFC Championship game. We all know how that went. But if they can spread the ball out a little bit more, if Lamar can do that and just throw the ball, because it's hard for any guy to get into a rhythm when you're not getting the ball and not getting targets, just going out there. So Bateman has to get opportunities, first of all, but then it's up to him to maximize and capitalize on those opportunities as well, which is a really, really big part. And speaking of Lamar Jackson, he apparently had a good practice on Wednesday. And obviously this was Baltimore's last practice before their preseason opener on Friday. So you, Paul, how has Lamar looked when you've been out there and you've seen him? Is he looked everything that he's led up to be, or do you think that he's still getting into a groove here?
I think it's been a little bit of hit and miss, which is fine and to be expected for the first couple of weeks. And I think it's always funny because you can't isolate any one factor in training camp, because anybody's success in training camp comes at the expense of somebody else's. So anytime we just spend time talking about how great this secondary could be when everybody's healthy, well, maybe that's the reason that Lamar Jackson is struggling as much as he is at times during training camp. He's had some nice days. But, if anybody's going up against this secondary, which we expect to be maybe, again, the best secondary in the league, or if not top 3, top 5, anybody's going to struggle in that situation. And you'd rather have him struggle, have him figure some stuff out, figure out what works and what doesn't in this Todd Monken offense, now than come week 1, and they're flabbergasted by what defenses are throwing at them, and they're all off the rails. You'd rather have it happen now. To me, the training camp stats, especially this deep now into Lamar Jackson's career, don't really matter. It's like a pitcher in spring training. If he's working on stuff, that's the time to tinker. That's the time to try some things. And so maybe with Rashad Bateman, it's the time to see what kind of routes they can finally get on the same page for. So to me, it's less important about the unofficial stats, although Jonas Shaffer does do a great job of tallying those at the end of the day. It's more about how comfortable Lamar Jackson is in this offense, and if he can figure out, what works and what doesn't as they get ready for the regular season.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And I 100% agree with you. This is the time to do that stuff. Don't do it in a December game. Don't
right.
Start to learn what's working in December. Figure it out now, and then you can see, okay, we can get away with doing this, but we can't get away with doing that. But obviously, the stats will tell all the same, where it's, Lamar threw an interception, but maybe he's just testing something out, which he will not do in the regular season. So again, Paul, preseason, a really important and fun time for these young players. Other guys I don't think we even talked about, like Kadir Ismail, Dayton Wade, guys like Josh Ross, other players too. But to round it out, here's a couple of fun questions for you. I know that the Ravens have unveiled a lot of stadium upgrades over the course of the last couple of weeks. I know you were there. You were getting the whole tour, trying out the foods. What was your overall experience like, and how excited can fans be for everything in store this season?
It's pretty cool. I mean, they've clearly invested a lot of time and effort into the designs of this. The biggest thing I think that will affect the average ticket holder is going to be that gatehouse and beer garden. We didn't get to see the first level beer hall on the first floor. I walked by it yesterday when I was covering the soccer match at M&T Bank Stadium, but we were on that second level to see the beer hall, the roof deck, and the kind of views. It's cool, and the food items are going to be great. The only thing is, a lot of these advancements, a lot of these upgrades are going to affect the premium areas this year. And that's something that, Kyle Goon wrote about on the BaltimoreBanner.com. But next year, hopefully when they give us the tour next year, we're just as wowed by what we've seen for the average fan, for fans that are just getting, they get to 1 or 2 games a year, or they have season tickets, on the second, third level. And that's, what they're happy to have. The ritzy stuff, the Blackwing suites are beautiful. They're awesome. They're probably, the only very small percentage of Ravens fans will ever get to see them and get to experience them. So I just hope that, we see more, and the Ravens have promised this. And, I don't by any means mean to single out the Ravens. This is the trend, around, all of sports, in particular in the NFL, that, you do have to cater to fans of all economic backgrounds. So I do hope that we just get to see more of those upgrades that happen around the rest of the stadium, and I'm sure they will come.
Yeah, again, they did a phenomenal job just based off of everything that I saw, and you did an amazing job covering it, putting together some video work for the Baltimore Banner. But last thing for you, Paul, I don't know if you saw the tweet from Baltimore Ravens Communications or not, but obviously on Tuesday they did the water slip and slide football recovery drill, and the communications said, well, guess what? Next week we're doing the inaugural media slip and slide water drill. If you are chosen or called upon, or however it works, if you are participating in that, how do you think you would do? And if it is not you, out of all your colleagues, who do you think would have the best and smoothest fumble recovery?
I mean, let's be honest. It's going to be me if it's going to be anybody. I put myself in the most ridiculous situations. They have that, like, for those who have been to Ravens training camp, they have that like pond, which has, next to the facility has algae all over it. And I briefly considered asking PR if I could do some kind of video, either swimming or fishing in there. But if they do give us the opportunity to do some, wet ball fumble recoveries, I will jump all over it. But I would love to see Jonas Shaffer, who recently got a haircut, so he doesn't have the same kind of mop that he did on top of his head recently. But diving for those balls, getting muddy, it would be fascinating watch. I just hope they open it up to fans so that fans can watch it too. Because without that, you know, I think fans would get more of a kick out of that than anything else.
So I know what I'm doing next. If you participate, Paul, we're lining this audio up with the video of you doing it. We're gonna see what goes on. I'm looking forward to it. I hope there's a lot of video, and I'm sure there will be. But,
oh yeah. I'm bringing my my swim trunks. Don't worry.
Yeah, 100. There we go. 100%. Love that. But Paul, appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining me. This was an awesome conversation. Tell people, please, where they can find you and what you're working on.
Yeah, the BaltimoreBanner.com. You can subscribe $1 for 6 months. Jonah Schaefer and I have the Banner Ravens podcast, where you can listen to it anywhere that you get your podcasts. Watch it live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. And on the Banner, BaltimoreBanner.com. We got plenty of coverage from myself, from Jonas, from Gianna Hahn, from Kyle Goon. Everybody pitching in for what should be an exciting Ravens season.
Yeah, 100%. And the links to all of Paul's work in the description down below, so be sure to check him out. He does great work covering both the Ravens and the Orioles. Like, I got the bright orange on today, so
yeah,
little orange representation over here. But Paul, appreciate your time again. Thank you so much, and thank you to everybody for tuning in today, watching Locked On Ravens, listening to Locked On Ravens. Be sure to again subscribe, follow along, video form and audio form. When we get back here tomorrow, it will be Ravens preseason day. We'll be previewing the game, talking about more positional battles, and a lot more to get you ready for the game coming up tomorrow on Locked On Ravens.